Shrink the Nation is a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably with a pour in hand. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the hosts and guests only and do not reflect the views of any employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or family members, especially our family members. They've asked us to be very clear about that. This show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here should be taken as medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. If you're in crisis, call a professional. If you're mad at something we said, we suggest journaling or emailing us with civility. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers. We're clinicians, not your clinicians, and we have the bourbon to prove it. Let's go. Welcome back to Shrink the Nation, where the bourbon's neat, the neuroses are bipartisan, and the therapy bills are national debt. Tonight, we're diagnosing the branch of government that forgot it's not a reality show. Congress, once the nation's prefrontal cortex, has become the limbic system on Twitter. Every fight is performative, every hearing is an audition, and every vote feels like family court with flags. It's the country's longest running group therapy session, except nobody listens, everyone interrupts, and the copay is your taxes. Poor one. We're about to talk about power, shame, and why America keeps electing the parents it swears it's done with. I'm David. I've got my 20 in the military, some of it in the Navy, some of it in the Air Force, all of it just joyful. I'm also a board certified psychiatrist today. I'm doing the Evan Williams. You got me intrigued, so
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a go. Do a little top of the bottom shelf. That's where we're going today. See if why not?
Well, Evan Williams is a spectacular option for those who want to get started in bourbon. It's cheap and it's easy. It's available, and it actually is not bad. I mean, that's the thing about bourbon, folks, is that it all tastes roughly the same.
Cheap, easy, and available. I think that's
Right.
exactly what you're looking for when you go to the bar.
Well, that was the long form of your nickname in high school, wasn't it? Yeah. Hey, this is Rob. I've got 30 years in the military, and I've got 25-ish and actually going on 26 in psychiatry. Coming at you from the United States now, firmly ensconced in the place I call home once again, which is nice. So if you sense a little lightness and pep in my step, that is why.
I feel it. I feel the lightness. I feel the pep. Well, let's see what we have here. I think this is our only topic, but Congress as the family that won't stop fighting. It was supposed to be our country's prefrontal cortex, the part that plans, reasons, and regulates emotion. Instead, it's acting like the teenage limbic system, reactive, impulsive, and grounded only when the lights go out.
Yeah, nicely stated. So we undertook this idea, because I think there was a sense, I mean, we've spent years knowing each other and messaging and talking about some of these things, and we'd hit on certain points at different times. But one of the fascinating things about doing this podcast over, the last months and collecting not one, not two, but tens of listeners, is that we have immersed ourselves in this subject. And as we march along, I'm finding that the goal of trying to understand what's going on, how did we get to where we are, is kind of clicking into place for me. I'm seeing the narrative in a clearer way. And one of the core issues at hand is Congress and the dysfunction of Congress. And I thought it would be interesting for us to maybe march backwards in time and talk about how Congress got to the state that it currently is. For years, I hear among my peers and friends and family, Congress is broken. I have heard that over and over again. I have felt that over and over and over again. But today, we're going to talk about the psychology, the history, the practical side of it. Why is it so broken at this moment? And what's the downstream consequences to that?
Yeah, I think if you go back, I think we touch on it often, but you probably trace this meltdown right now back to the 1990s, to when Newt Gingrich turned outrage into business model. C-SPAN became trauma porn for the civically curious. It really did. Since then, governing's just taken a backseat to branding. It's not policy making anymore, it's performance art. For watching this institution just stuck in Arrested Development, sometimes it's fun to watch. It's only gotten worse with YouTube, but it's just clips of policymakers trying to make their points. If you watch it, It's them reading their notes and trying to sound like they're making these big deal statements, but it doesn't move anybody. It's like it's 2 minutes of I gotcha, followed by the next person's 2 minutes of gotchas that then leads to no fucking change in vote.
Well, it's also a study in the attention economy that. So, for our tens of listeners, let me take you back in time to 1994 ish. That's when the Republican Revolution, as it was known then, happened, and they first took over, gained a majority in Congress. And prior to that, for a very long time, it had largely been a Democrat-held institution. It also, I mean, if we go back even further in time, post World War II, so 1945 up to, say, around Watergate, it had been a relatively stable institution, and there was a reason for that. We had just come through a national crisis, and it was an existential crisis. Historically, we can look back and we can say, we won, but on December 7th, when Pearl Harbor was attacked, there was a sense that we could lose, that this might be bigger than us, and our national identity and safety was on the line. All of a sudden, we had been hit, and yes, it was Hawaii, and we came through that. We coalesced into this very unified, the arsenal of democracy. And we, had it not been for the United States, the war would have turned out very differently. But we entered and we helped turn the tide along with our allies, and we won. And then following the end of the war, the makeup of our governance was still really quite unified. They had come together to fight this war, and they stayed very unified. And in Congress in particular, this was individuals who had all universally served, fought together, respected one another because of that they might disagree, but they fundamentally believed that the people on their left and their right were patriots, and really did have the best interests of the United States at heart. And what flowed from there was a stable institution. It worked to a degree. I mean, they had their problems, and we can go back to the 50s, the Red Scare, and it wasn't an ideal institution because it's made of people. But moving into the 90s, largely when the greatest generation started to give way to the baby boomer generation, some dynamics changed and the unified nature changed. And when the Republicans took over in 94, and I'm not, just for clarity, this isn't a Democrat-Republican issue. This isn't things were stable under the Democrats and became unstable under the Republicans. This is a time difference. And it just so happens that from a dynamic standpoint, who was in power and who was not in power just so happens to be Democrats and Republicans, and then the Republicans came in. But it could have very easily went the other direction. What I really want to communicate to our tens of listeners is that this is not a Republican-Democrat issue. It just so happens that this shift in the attention economy, this shift away from policy happened in roughly 94, 96. And it just so happened to be that the Republicans had not been in power and found a way to get back in power. What way that was to divest themselves from policy. It became culture wars. And it became performative. And they learned, utilizing a 24-hour news cycle, that every speech became a commercial. And every scandal became a series, a plot in the running reality show that is politics. They learned it. They learned it fast, and it was a radical divergence from what we had done before. And the chaos began or intensified. I suppose there's always a low-grade level of chaos. I blame the Macarena. It just so happens the Macarena was huge then. It was completely nonsensical, performative choreography, and the rest of the world just followed. Hey, Macarena.
But what was going on at that time? So, when you're looking at that time frame between the early 90s to the 2000s, the early 2000s, what's really happening in the United States in this time frame?
End of the Cold War.
I really want to explore it. Like what was really happening
Well, Rob was in high school. It was one thing that was happening at late 80s, early 90s. I hesitate to lay the blame on myself, but I do feel like I was rather chaotic and unfocused at that time. So it may be partly my fault. But no, from my standpoint, what really happened was that the Cold War ended. And when the Cold War ended, there was an incredible sense of relief. I know personally it was really nice not to go to bed wondering if nuclear Armageddon would happen overnight. That was kind of part and parcel of my childhood up until that point, and all of a sudden, yay, we can scratch that one off the list. But what ended up transpiring is relief followed by an identity crisis, and that's the psychology of it. We as a nation had an identity crisis, and the sense of urgency to stay unified started to dissipate, and we took advantage of it.
When I remember this time period, and I was young too, younger.
Yeah, rub it in.
Considerably. You had Desert Storm and then nothing, right? Like it was the end of the Cold War. There was nothing really happening tension wise there until 9/11, major at least. And so directly impacting us. You had Bosnia, things that were happening kind of beyond our borders, but they weren't directly impacting, at least that we were seeing. We didn't have this global news cycle the way that we have it now, right? Like we just didn't have that.
Not quite, but
It was starting to happen.
it was. So for the Gulf War, CNN televised the Gulf War. It was the first time you could watch 24 hours a day a war unfold. And I'm glad you brought up the Gulf War, because that actually is an element here psychologically, is that the Gulf War proved to us, and it proved to our enemies, that we were light years ahead of them militarily, that our military capability was, at that moment in time, was untouchable by our enemies. And it forced them to reevaluate and change how they were doing things. But it also proved the American people we are untouchable. And the problem with being untouchable, with not facing an enemy that can touch us, that threatens us, is that it also opens the door to disunity. And boy, did disunity take hold and start to proliferate.
Well, I think as a kid growing up in that system, it was unfathomable to even imagine what it would have been like in like the 1950s to have had that fear that there was going to be a nuclear war, to hear your parents talk about, or your grandparents or whoever talk about having to hide under their desk from nuclear fallout. It was just like, well, that's silly. Didn't you just see what happened on the TV? It took like 3 days to kick the shit out of whatever, that was like nothing. We're good. And so when your whole childhood was that, there was no sense that there was any problem throughout that entire time period. And so all there was in Congress was culture war and outrage, because things were actually quite good. Nobody gave a shit about policy because all the arrows were headed up. So at that point, it was, we don't want to change anything. Everything's looking pretty damn good. Let's just call the other guy out for the stuff that they're doing that we can actually blame on him. And this is where I get to the family argument of, it was just a blowjob, man. I mean, we would be delighted, I think, today if that was the complaint that we were having with the executive branch. If that was the only complaint that people had, is that the president had a mistress, we would probably be like, great. No shit, Sherlock. We know he had a mistress. He paid her off. We know he had a whole lawsuit about that. He had 34 felony convictions predicated on the fact that he paid her off.
Yeah.
No big deal. In the 90s, that was impeachment.
And as a throwback to some of the prior episodes we've had, because we really have touched on all the elements individually, and this kind of brings it all together. Shamelessness. And it's when shamelessness started to creep into politics. There historically has been a sort of a moral litmus test that was forced upon our politicians by the population. And, the reality is the population's always been the population. People may aspire to a certain moral standard, but let's face it, people don't necessarily live that moral standard. And everyone understood. I mean, everyone in their heart of hearts absolutely understood what, say, affairs, mistresses, shady behavior, what it looked like, because it was in their life. But that reflection to, we expected something better from our parents. Now, we grow up and we realize when we become parents, that the act of becoming a parent is biology. It does not make you better, smarter, stronger. Now your kids look at you as better, smarter, stronger, but you're still human. But we there used to be a moral litmus test that we forced upon our politicians. And that's the moment when that moral litmus test started to slip, that it became possible to be morally fallible and the American people still support you. And it did start right there. So
Yeah.
with a blowjob. And for the audiences, just your memory, I know our loyal tens of listeners do remember this, but David is not allowed to talk about blowjobs at Thanksgiving, which I think it's a reasonable rule of thumb.
It's a good rule of thumb. No talking about blowjobs at the dinner table.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've implemented it.
It wasn't me that did it. It was in the family.
But when I got back from this deployment, first family rule I implemented was that I immediately laid it down for everybody.
Hey, no talking about blowjobs at the dinner table. This is called the Bill Clinton rule.
You should have seen the look on my kids' faces. They just, okay.
Oh, okay. We'll stop. We'll stop now. No more looking at you, Chuck.
Exactly.
No, actually, you brought up something, and now I got to go down a rabbit hole because you brought it up.
That's what we do.
Well, it occurs to me because that was 25 years ago, and that was the Democratic Party circling the wagons for their president.
Yes.
And it was the Republican Party pretending to hold the moral high ground and being just horrified by the idea of there being a blowjob. And then the Democrats at the time being, just a blowjob.
And in the context, as Newt Gingrich was prosecuting Bill Clinton's behavior, he was engaged in an extramarital affair.
Yeah. So, again, a lot of performative stuff. And then a few years later, it was Al Franken who unceremoniously resigned from the Senate because he had posed for a photo where he was pretending to
miming,
grasping the breasts of a asleep woman on a plane from a distance, I believe, too. That took down his career as a Democrat several years later.
Yeah.
Fast forward to
don't be a comedian when you're a politician is what to be learned there.
And in all fairness, probably not a good thing to pose for, Senator, but he still did that. And he resigned. And I assume somebody in the party said, bro, you should probably resign. But we're 25 years away from Clinton. And how much more is there for people to really do? There's really not much more. There's not many more lines to cross than have already been crossed that we can cross as humans in the political sphere. At what point are we just straight up electing porn stars who are actively performing? It isn't the Democratic Party that's okay with this behavior. In fact, if anything, you could make the argument now that the Democratic Party is becoming the party of morality. And one might argue that they've been that party for a while the Republican Party has been holding the mantle, saying that they're the party of morality, but they have been the defenders of amorality for quite a while, at least for, the last decade. They had defended amoral behaviors since at least 2016. So how much further, at what point do they stop the performative outrage at the behaviors?
Well, I think we're darn close to that, where it's a shrug and maybe a statement of move right along.
So, at what point are they, whatever, he's,
well,
he's good at his job.
There.
What do I care?
Well, and that's I suppose the fundamental question, because I don't even think being good at his job is a requirement anymore. So from a
fuck you, we need to vote.
Exactly.
I mean, because that's kind of what's happening now is
Indeed. And from a family system, what we're seeing, so psychodynamically from a family system standpoint, this is our friend Murray Bowen. So Murray came up with family system theory. And what we see is that under an external force, families tend to unify. And when they unify, because there's an external force forcing it, they can tolerate differentiation within the family and stay unified. And when there is no external force, the worst time for families, oddly enough, so you talk to any family, what they say they want is peace. They want peace and calm and quiet. They want everyone to be happy, quote unquote. But from a family system standpoint, what you find is that when you actually achieve peace and calm, that's when the ability to tolerate differentiation within that family diminishes and internal conflict increases. So once we lost our external unifying force, we also lost our ability to allow for differentiation among the members. And you see this. You see the purity tests that have become increasingly part of being a Democrat or being a Republican. And that creates this internal chaos, which we absolutely see at this moment. So how far does it go? I suppose murder on the streets. And there's already been jokes about it. I can shoot someone on Broad Street and it wouldn't change the
Fourth Ave.
electorate or whatever, whatever street.
Well, yeah, it's something. Yeah. And it's not, you'll still vote for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in layman's terms, break down what you're saying is as long as nobody's rocking the boat or as long as
there is not a sense of external crisis, we will focus on internal crisis. And if we are focused on internal crisis, then any level of maintaining some sense of unity will be tolerated. So any level of action outside of the family, I don't care what brother does, he can go kill the neighbors. We still have to maintain the family. So we'll tolerate anything until there is an external force that threatens us.
I think what you just described. So essentially, what you just said, and I hate to describe it this way, but Congress is turning into the mafia. As long as you're voting the way that we vote, do whatever the hell you want.
As long as you're earning.
As long as you're with us and you're going in our direction, we're good.
Mm-hmm.
But you get too much heat, you draw too much attention, or you go against the family and you're out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's very much where we are in this. And that's not to put too fine a point on it. Interestingly, the existential crisis is coming from inside, not outside. And one of the solutions, and I've felt this for ages, I just didn't have terminology to explain it, but I have said for years that the solution to our internal United States problems is an external existential war. I don't want to fight it. I don't want to be in the middle of it. But boy, if we had a existential crisis, a war against an enemy that we really questioned whether we could win or not, see how quickly we unify.
And you see that at this point as being a way to unify the Democrats and the Republicans.
Yes. Unify them. Again, the energy would be focused. And this is Bowen's family system theory. The energy would be focused externally. The energy coming into the system would be external. And because of that, it takes the pressure off internally. And internally, we then have the ability to better tolerate a family, the distinctions of a family. There's an external force that unifies us. We don't have to rely on purity testing. The fact that you are a member of the family is enough. And there is a sense that everyone is working in their best interest against this external force, because right now, all the energy is coming internally, and it's just too easy to see everyone independently acting for their own interests because there's nothing coming at us externally. We are fraying from the interior, not from the outside.
You have two separate groups that are just fighting for position within, but they're literally accomplishing nothing.
Well, and so, Congress is an interesting mirror for us. It is comprised of the people we put in there. We're voting for them. And their chaos is absolutely a mirror of our chaos, the American people's chaos. The fact that we don't have a unifying worldview any longer. For the longest time, it was communism. It was the need to champion democracy. And when we had some external thing that was the opposite of democracy, we could really lean into the values of democracy. We could really lean into freedom of speech and freedom of the press and embrace it and love it and tolerate it. As soon as that external force disappeared, we lost our identity as a people. Now tolerating the nuances and messiness, the worst form of government is democracy until you compare it to every other form of government. And now we have to sit with that, and it's hard. So there's a reason why there's a vocal element within the United States that is becoming more and more comfortable with the concept of autocracy. And we're all chaotic. We all feel chaotic. We don't have a unifying sense. We've lost some of the institutions that used to unify us. We've lost those. The church is not a unifying force anymore. Democracy is not a unifying force anymore. We have drifted away from institutions and we have drifted toward TikTok, these individual experiences of chaos. And Congress reflects that. So it's a mirror. When we complain about Congress, we're complaining about our own internal state. Congress is just a mirror that we're looking at. We get angry at it. We say they're broken. It's really just a reflection of us. And we don't like to admit that. It's all the shadow stuff that the people of the United States is dealing with that we see in Congress. It makes us super uncomfortable. It makes us angry. But really, step one is look interior. Look inside.
You said a lot, and
yeah, I know.
It's causing mental anguish.
I'm having an existential crisis at this moment.
No, I am.
I think we should take a break and play the Macarena. For everyone who listens to this episode, we'll send you an AOL free CD in the mail.
That's right.
Circa 1995, 96, when every time you opened up your mailbox, there were 15 AOL CDs. We really want to capture the ambiance of the mid-90s.
You could have a nice coaster.
Maybe a Beanie Baby too.
They'll be worth something one day.
It's a great retirement plan, folks. Invest everything you have into Beanie Babies because they only go up in value, clearly.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Rob from Shrink the Nation. As my friend David so eloquently states at the beginning of the show, we are clinicians, but we're not your clinician. We love to joke around and dive into the tough topics, but there's something really important we need to say. If you're struggling with your mental health or facing substance use issues, we want you to know you're not alone. We have dedicated our professional careers to mental health, and we care deeply about it. It's okay to ask for help. Reaching out to a professional in your area could be the first step toward feeling better. Don't wait. There's support out there, and it works. Please take that first step. We want you to be well. Now let's get back to the show. Oh, and don't tell David I said he was eloquent. He'll be insufferable.
You're making a compelling point that our ability to separate ourselves so much in who we are, what we listen to, what we believe divides us so much. Even our fears, I think our fear of what an external enemy would be is, I don't think anybody at this point fears an external war, even in the idea that there would be an external threat. The reality is, I don't know what that would be. Like, even if we were dragged into World War III, I don't know that anybody think, at least, that it would happen here, right? Or that it would involve the vast majority of the United States. Like, they would look anything like World War II.
Wouldn't start that way.
Right.
It would get there.
Well, and I don't know that most people think that. I think that's just it. I don't know that most people would assume, based upon the technology and the way that wars have gone over the last several decades, that an existential threat would actually mean them.
Let me tell the tens of listeners, let me crank your anxiety.
Let's scare the shit out of everybody.
Yeah, let me. So we have transitioned from a sense of war, which prevailed, say, starting with the first Gulf War, and then moving forward into the wars, the Bush wars, the Bushfire wars, whether you want to lay it on President Bush or just call them bushfires, the Iraq, Afghanistan kind of environments in which it was a coin operation, so counterinsurgency operation. It happened over there. The enemy didn't have the ability to hurt us in a realistic sense, but they could bloody our nose. And believe me, I've been there to see it. But we could regain control very quickly. So we had air, land, sea, space, and information dominance all the time. The next war, we will fight a large-scale combat operation, which the terminology is LISCO. We will fight a LISCO engagement against a near peer. And it won't be one near peer. It'll be multiple near peers at once. So it will be China, it will be Russia, it will be North Korea, it will be Iran. And we'll also kick off probably all at the same time. And we are really the only nation that is positioned to even remotely touch that. The big difference here is that they have the ability to hurt us land, sea, air, information, and space. They have the ability to hurt us across the board, not just momentarily, but they can bring those systems down. They can have dominance over the sea, the land, the air for a time, space, and dominance over information. Here's the other big thing that in a LISCO environment appears more like, we can look at Ukraine, it's going to look more like, say, in the elements of it, like World War I. They have reverted to trench warfare because their ability to maneuver has been limited by the weapon systems that are in existence and currently. But it will look like that, plus the ability to hit us across the entire length and breadth of the line of engagement. So their long range abilities to hit the United States are absolutely in place. No one is safe ever in a LISCO environment. Intercontinental ballistic missiles can hit you anywhere, anytime, and it's a reality. Now, will it start that way? No way. It'll start with a local engagement that will feel very much like an old school war. It will escalate quickly. And when any nation starts to feel threatened, when we push closer and closer to their home, and if we do the things you need to do to win a war like this, which is hit their ability to produce the weapons of war, that's their homeland. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to hit our homeland. And we have no ability to stop it. You know, the idea of a golden dome, it's myth, because all they have to do is keep launching missiles and someone's going to run out first. So this would be existential. This would touch the homeland. This would touch the average person. This would hit Columbus, Ohio, Mobile, Alabama, name a city. They would all be at risk.
Well, thank you for that depressing perspective.
I've been living it for years now, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying as a soldier.
You know, when I was in my late teens, that was my job, was to keep the comms up while we were looking in the air for
Getting killed, yeah.
Kim Jong-il to be shooting these things at the U.S. off the coast of North Korea. Like, this was what we were looking for. And it aged me terribly. So I started looking like I was in my, early teens when I was at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a terrifying thing, but I don't think people, they don't think about that.
No.
They don't think about that. That isn't in their minds. That's not what they're thinking about. They're so focused on the enemy within. They're so focused on being angry about owning one another and fighting these culture wars with each other. It very much reminds me of family systems, Murray Bowen. But I want to move forward and talk about when we're seeing the fallout of the kids in these situations where the families couldn't work it out. And we're dealing with that adult who had the parents who were just not great parents. You had the one parent who was physically abusive, and you had the one parent who was there. You have your patient, who was us. They're upset. I was abused as a kid. I would get beaten all the time. They'll say the one parent would beat me, but I never understood why the other parent didn't intervene. And from a congressional perspective, if I intervene in the beating and I don't stop the beating, then they're going to be the bad guy. If they beat them and I let it happen, they're going to be the bad guy. But if I intervene and I stop it, then they won't be the bad guy.
Yeah, and in most family systems, we can develop a model that's pretty clear where, let's say, dad is a raging, abusive sociopath and everyone else is just trying to survive. That's overly simplistic. In most family systems, it's not that simple. There may be an abuser or someone who's more prone to, anger outbursts or whatever, but the system is invested in maintaining the system, and each element of that system is investing in maintaining their role. So absolutely, it's not that they are normally that they're afraid. It's that they are invested in whatever their role is, which might be, I need to be the good parent. I want to be the good parent. I want to be the one that brings comfort after the abuse, because that's how the system works. And that's what I think we're seeing right now. There's not a good parent right now. Neither side are a good parent. Each side is angling so that the other side can be the abuser and they can take on the role of the good parent. We're seeing that in the government shutdown right now.
Right.
Each side is unwilling to blink until the American people have suffered enough pain that they have to end up blaming someone. And as soon as that demonstrates itself, and it's drifting right now where they're blaming, seemingly, the majority of Americans are seemingly blaming Republicans right now, that once that differentiates significantly enough, the bad parent, whoever gets labeled bad parent, will blink, and the good parent will say, I'm good, come to us, look at us, we're protecting you. When in fact, they're both just letting the suffering happen, and they're not doing their job. They've got one goddamn job. One, constitutionally, one. If you can't do your one job, then you really shouldn't be in there.
It isn't one side or the other being problematic. It really is both sides being problematic, but it is very much both sides making active through inaction efforts to win by trying to steer the narrative. And it is hurting people.
Without a doubt.
This is not, are we doing what's right? This is, can we steer the narrative properly? Can we appear to be right at the end of this?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is the equivalent of dad refusing to go to work or mom refusing to go to work because they want the family to appreciate them. So I'm not going to exert my responsibilities until I get the result that I want. So from a family, and I think, unfortunately,
this isn't family
all of us,
systems theory. This is an episode of Family Guy.
It is. We just need Quahog and what's the beer? Whatever beer he drinks, and we need a lot of it. But it really is, and I'm sure for our tens of listeners who all grew up as human, I assume all of us, we've seen this in families. We've seen how individuals will refuse to engage in their personal responsibility in order to get a result. And there's a quote, which you probably should go ahead and drink. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. And our system right now is perfectly designed to get the exact results that we're seeing. I see your hopelessness. I see it.
It's not hopelessness. It's dismay.
Dismay.
Yeah.
Grief. I feel grief very often about all this.
Well, perhaps it's maybe just disappointment across the board. I think when you live in a two-party system and neither one is producing quality, I mean, all you ask for out of your elected leaders is leadership. And what we're getting none of is leadership. And I think when you go back and you think about the real existential threat that exists, very real possibility of being engaged in a war with four near peers, where at least one of them, being China, is not a near peer, but is very much a peer. I would like our leadership to be much more serious and much more capable of either not becoming engaged in said war, by just being able to be diplomatically involved and working through whatever. We live in a global economy. We live on a planet that we probably all could work together to keep going. And
would be nice.
We have geopolitical boundaries that, we could potentially respect. And considering that I can see where Russia, North Korea, and Iran, those are actually Russia and North Korea. I think those are two countries that are going to be incredibly difficult to deal with. Iran, from a diplomatic perspective, I think easier to work with just from the fact that they're much more isolated in their region and you have ways to work diplomatically with other areas. China, because they're becoming so powerful, they have less and less reason to want to get into actual war because they're becoming so economically prosperous that they're kind of getting to a point where their desire to get into a war is lowering and lowering. Like they just need to wait us out.
David, I am disappointed. You are implying logic in these decisions.
Well, no, I know, but that's the thing is like China. I don't know that China 10 years ago, China would probably be much more interested in getting into a war with us than China is probably getting to the point like we don't need to get in a war; they'll destroy themselves. Like they're at a.
That's possible. That's possible.
I think China's positioned themselves now where they're like, if we wait till 2050, we will have we're good. Like they have disabled thetheir ability to produce. They're still depending upon oil. They're going in the direction of more
the dinosaur.
Yeah, no, we really are. I mean, they've just went after all of their scientific institutions like they've just disabled themselves for the next 30 years. Like, we're good.
I have no doubt that there is a vocal group within China that is speaking logic such as that. I also have no doubt that the most likely flashpoint here is going to be Taiwan, and there is zero logical reason to fight over Taiwan. Well, control of the South China Sea, I suppose, might be the logic that they slap on to an emotional decision. So, I think, and this is the other element to this, is that we can't look at them as monoliths that are going to make sound, reasoned decisions all the time. There's a lot of reasons why war could kick off.
I mean, China's run by a group of engineers, and we're run by
TikTok stars,
reality TVs. Well, we're run by reality TV stars, but
the Kardashians. We're run by the Kardashians.
We are run by lawyers.
Oh.
I mean, there's a reason their cities look like their cities and our cities look like our cities. It's just, it's economics. It would be nice if our country would take seriously, rather than being in the emotional battles that we get into, to own each other on the bipartisan spectrum and just kind of view the fact that we'll just cross our arms and pout like babies to get what we want, as we're doing right now.
In that owning one another, I mean, that's like textbook sibling rivalry. I mean, just textbook. It's just wanting to win, to put yourself in a one-up position over a sibling for no good reason. Your position is really not threatened, but that's what's happening. And owning the other, the tiers of a liberal or whatever the equivalent going toward the conservatives, there is a weird pleasure that each side derives in completely frustrating and stymieing the other side. It gives them a sense of joy and accomplishment and peace for a moment. But then, of course, it ends and you have to go right back.
The dopamine hit, yeah. How many times have you walked away from just, I don't know, a day, a week of work, of therapy, of working a psych unit, whatever, where you just thought to yourself, man, that entire day was 100% just self-created misery by all of my patients. My entire day was 100% self-created misery. It's not every day.
No.
But there are a lot of days where everything that happened was just self-inflicted. If everybody that I saw that day would have just made slightly less self-damaging choices in a moment, there would have been far easier days.
We'd be out of a job.
We'd be out of a job.
If it wasn't for booze and bad decisions.
Speaking of which,
drink.
Well, this has been enlightening. Congress is still acting like teenagers, and unfortunately, we probably won't change that.
We won't, or at least not in the short term. Now, I will, for our tens of listeners who I probably have crushed their spirits and hope and will to press on, I actually have a reasonable hopefulness for the future. I know at times it feels like we're going off the rails, but I think the rails are pretty solid. And I think ultimately what will likely happen, and it may get worse before it gets better, but what will likely happen is something that does feel existential to us. And there will be some unifying force. And that's all we need. It won't take much. We just need enough of a unifying force because people will love that feeling. They will enjoy that feeling, that getting behind something. They fall in line if they are given something to get behind. And
like the Macarena.
Like the Macarena, man. Maybe that's a good prescription, man. Hey, Macarena. Ha ha! I love that you knew how to do the dance, and I wish that our adoring tens of listeners could have watched you just do that. So I do have hope, and I do think the 2030s will be brighter than the 2020s.
Man, I'm getting tired of saying that every decade. All right. Well, so Congress is the mirror we love to hate. When we say it's broken, what we really mean is the reflection is too accurate. We see our own impulsivity, projection, and fear of accountability staring back. At its best, Congress was meant to be the wise elder archetype, measured, moral, and steady. Today, it's the trickster, occasionally brilliant, mostly disruptive, and just self-aware enough to make us laugh while we spiral. Prescription time?
Sure. So my prescription is something, unfortunately, we went down some rabbit holes. We didn't get to the addiction to power element to this. I'm going to say Congress needs to complete a 12-step program for power addiction. Step 1, admit you're powerless over the news cycle. Step 2, remember you already have power. It's literally your job to have power. And step 3 through 12 is stop using the country as your emotional support sponsor.
I like it. All right. I'm going to go with Congress must attend family therapy before every new session. So no hearings until everyone can say, I feel frustrated, instead of you're destroying America. C-SPAN airs the group's progress. Ratings will soar.
Yeah, and those are all specific to Congress. I have one for you and me and our tens of listeners and the American people in general. Is it's time to grow the hell up. You got to be an adult, and it sucks. It sucks being an adult. It sucks having to absorb the energies and still do your job. And so, what I'll ask of all of us is every day start out as, what is my job, and am I doing my job? And do it. Do your damn job. You got one job. Do it.
I like it. All right. Well, thank you for everyone who was brave enough to stick around, and everyone who's curled up under their desk waiting for the fallout. You can come out now. It's over. Hit us up on our socials. Smash that subscribe. Sign up for our weekly newsletter. Really appreciate you sticking around. Sorry for scaring the hell out of you.
Scary stuff, man. Let's go, folks. Remember the term.
It is Wolverines. Robbie will lead the charge. We'll all be there.
I always was a big fan of C. Thomas Howell. I think I modeled my life off him for a very long time. Wolverines, because it's always a good choice to take an AK-47 and shoot at a fully armored attack helicopter. I mean that's a good life choice. Yeah,
works every time. All right, we're gonna cue up that music, and we are out.